Toys R Us makes an AI commercial. Meta looks at training AI with your content. And we play the role of marketing kings for a day. All this and more on today's Strong Coffee Drip. Hi again, everyone. I'm Brian from Strong Coffee Marketing, joined as always by noted Denver Nuggets enthusiast, Iain. How are you, Iain?
I'm well, thank you. Yeah, good.
Why is a guy from Scotland so into the Denver Nuggets?
I love basketball, and I loved it growing up, but I kind of fell out of the habit of watching it for a long time. And then when I moved to Canada, we had sports channels, so I just started watching basketball again. And I watched, was it the 2018, I think it was the 2018 sort of season, and I just started following teams that I liked the way they play. So I liked the Nuggets, the way they played, so I just started following them and supporting them.
Big Canadian on that
Raptors
team.
Raptors as well. I like the Raptors in the East and the Nuggets in the West. So
yeah,
I just enjoyed watching their games. That was all.
Yeah.
No history behind it or anything.
Have you ever been to Denver?
I have not. No.
Okay. Nice place.
Oh.
I've been to the airport.
Right.
And it's a nice airport.
Apparently the airport's, massive.
It's quite big. Yeah. We could do a whole episode on what people think of the airport. That's a different episode.
Yes.
We'll do. Speaking of places, etc., Canada Day is just a few days away. You might note that I'm wearing red. It's actually kind of lumberjack as well. You're not wearing red, but you're like, I'm going to wear red on Canada Day.
I will wear it on Monday, yeah.
Okay. And that's something for me. This is as far as it goes for red, so I'm going to have to recycle this one. Not a big red guy. But yeah, it's a few days away. It's a chance to celebrate our great country and partake in some of our local culinary delights. Like any country, Canada is the birthplace of some pretty great food. Poutine, the donair, beaver tails, peanut butter, the California roll, which I had no idea it came from Canada, and of course, everyone's favorite love-hate, pineapple on pizza. What's one made-in-Canada food that you find to be your favorite?
My absolute favorite Canadian food would have to be maple syrup. And that would have to be the maple syrup that you get right at the end of the season, where it's so dark and so thick and it's got a really strong flavor. I love that really dark grade of maple syrup. I think it's absolutely delicious. So that would be my favorite.
And Duncan from afar was unable to come today because it's as an agency, when we record the podcast, if there's a client thing that needs to get done, that's our priority. That's what Duncan's doing today. He also said maple syrup. For me, it's funny you mentioned maple syrup because as somebody that's grown up here, I've never really had a lot of maple syrup. Like, I know it's a big deal and every once in a while I would get it, but it's not something that if I'm having pancakes on a Saturday morning, it's generally not maple syrup. It's table syrup that we use. But I do agree. A good maple syrup is really hard to beat and definitely Canadian. For me, there's a bunch. Like, I like pineapple on pizza. I don't care what the haters say. Donairs are really good. Now, Iain, you and I will have a donair every once in a while when we're in the office. We'll sneak over to a place around the corner.
Yeah,
Halifax owned donair type thing. Although I don't really have that many donairs. They are very good. Poutine for me is a 3 times a year thing. But the one thing I really, really like is a Nanaimo bar. Have you ever had a Nanaimo bar?
I have, yes.
And they're a bit love-hate, too. There's a lot of people that really don't like Nanaimo bars. Yeah. Anybody that doesn't know, it's kind of a coconut-type chocolate bottom with kind of a yellow custardy middle and then some melted chocolate on top. And then you put them in the fridge so they're kind of hard when you slice them. I find them very delightful. I maybe only have them a few times a year. Around Christmas, if there's Nanaimo bars out, I tend to eat them all. But I think for me, that's probably my favorite Canadian food. And we were talking about it ahead of time, Iain. It's kind of funny with Canadian food that, you can go to an Italian restaurant, you can go to a French restaurant, you can go for Chinese food. Yeah. But the idea of going to a Canadian restaurant, I mean, there's some locally here where they have sourced local foods, but if you were overseas and somebody's like, let's go to a Canadian restaurant, I'd be like, oh, there's such thing, like what's this going to be all about, right? Because it's such a diverse kind of selection of things that have been created here. So very interesting. Now I'm hungry. I don't have any of these things in my cupboard. I have peanut butter in my cupboard. I could have some peanut butter, another one of my favorites. So yeah, Duncan mentioned maple syrup. And you're a maple syrup enthusiast, which is interesting to know. I wouldn't have thought that would be yours.
Yeah, I've loved it for a long time. It's so hard to get back in the UK to get the really, really dark stuff. So anytime a friend or colleague would travel to Canada, I'd be like, you got to get me a bottle of the end of season maple syrup.
So you're a maple syrup smuggler.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't get the stuff at the airport that come in the maple leaf things, right?
No, that's usually quite light stuff, I think.
Yeah,
I haven't seen
like
that
amber.
Really dark, the really dark stuff in that, yeah.
Yeah. There, that's as much maple syrup chat as we're going to have on the podcast for an entire year. It's not going to be a regular segment. We've got a pretty AI heavy episode ahead of us too. Let's get right to it. Not really on purpose. It just kind of came out. The things we wanted to talk about were AI based. So first story, I saw this one just a couple days ago. Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, is facing legal challenges in Europe over its plan to use publicly shared posts on these platforms to train artificial intelligence. The Irish Data Protection Commission has intervened, leading to Meta to postpone AI training activities. Meta emphasizes its commitment to transparency and user control, comparing its practices favorably to those of other tech giants like OpenAI and Google. And I know why you're smiling at this, because we talked about it ahead of time. When the AI training does resume, users in the UK and the EU will be notified and given the opportunity to object to their data being used, but not all objections will be accepted. I know this isn't the last time we're going to see this whole idea of AI and where it's getting its data from to train AI models, especially with companies like Meta that have that data readily available to them. Iain, where do you come out on this idea of people objecting to the idea of Meta using Instagram and Facebook data to train their AI models?
So this is an interesting topic for me because, as we've talked about many times on this podcast, when you upload anything, post anything on Facebook, Instagram, any of the social media platforms, that is no longer your content. You do not own it. That's in Facebook's terms and services and all those kinds of things. So, and I think for the most part, people do understand that. I don't think they are under the impression that they still own this content, but maybe people are. But because of that, I don't think they've kind of got a leg to stand on in a way if they are unhappy about it. The other thing is, obviously people were happy to post it when they posted it, and it is public facing and all these things. So it's a bit of a grey area for me. I think, should we be concerned? Probably, but is there anything we can do about it? Perhaps not. I know that obviously, as you were talking about, is their headquarters still in Ireland? That's for Facebook, or was it just the Irish?
I think it was these guys that were kind of coming out and objecting on behalf of everybody.
Well, I know that Europe obviously has the GDPR, which is much more, takes much larger steps to protect user identity and privacy and all these things. But yeah, I think for a large portion of the world, this is just going to be how it is going forward. And if you don't want to be included, then you're going to have to stop posting, but they're still going to have access to everything you've posted in the past because, again, you don't own that.
Yeah. And, we've talked about it a lot, that social media is not free.
No, absolutely.
And I think this is almost like their way of saying it's time to pay up. You know what? And the way we're going to do it is not through some sort of monetary fee to use our channels like Facebook and Instagram. It's through the data that you've put out there for years and years and years, and the data you will continue to put out there to years in the future. This is our payment. This is how we're going to, make money off of everything we've done for you guys. So while I don't necessarily agree with it, you're kind of right. Like I don't really know if people have a leg to stand on because you happily posted it out there for the public to see. And it's just kind of like, you're paying for using a free service. Because, to run Facebook and Instagram and on these other channels definitely isn't free. They got to make their money somewhere. And for the longest time, they were making their money through ads. This is another avenue for them to make money.
Yes, absolutely. So, and I guess people can, it's up to each individual to evaluate, as you mentioned, this is your method of payment to use that as a tool. and it's up to each individual to decide whether that method of payment is the tool still valuable enough to them to warrant that method of payment sort of thing. And if not, then just delete your Facebook account and you won't have to worry about it going forward.
The sun will come up tomorrow if you delete Facebook.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a scientific fact. It will. And you know what's funny? Whenever I see a story like this, I'm like, okay, yeah, they're going to use this data to train. And then I start thinking about all the stupid things I see on Facebook and Instagram. What are these tools going to look like if they read all this stuff? There's a lot of garbage on there. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah. You want to train using this? Oh, okay. Have fun with that.
It's the next step in the dead internet theory.
Yeah, it's
has it all been AIs for the last decade anyway?
Yeah. I don't use Facebook a lot as an individual, but when I do go on there, I use Facebook Marketplace. I love looking at random things, but I'll be on Facebook just briefly while I'm basically going to Marketplace, and I'll just read a few posts, and I just think, what are we doing here? What's going on? And it's something else. So I think we agree there that this is the payment. This is what it is. Sorry.
And it'll be interesting to see how it does progress. I mean, when you were talking about this and you mentioned the fact that I was laughing, it is, Facebook didn't try to really justify it or anything like that. Their justification was really, well, everyone else is doing it, so we're going to do it too. And I thought that was quite amusing. But
we're going to be 1 ounce better than Google and OpenAI. It's like, well, okay, thanks for the low bar.
Yeah,
we told you. Yeah. Okay, we'll see. And like I mentioned earlier in the intro, this isn't the last time we'll hear about this. This is going to go on. Like, is it data through Reddit? Is it data through websites? It's going to go on and on and on because these models need something to train on. That's how they learn, right?
Yeah.
Right. Moving right along, AI specific again. This one is really interesting, and this just happened a couple days ago. Toys R Us has faced backlash for using OpenAI's Sora. It's Sora. We've talked about it briefly in the past. It's an OpenAI's AI video generation tool, and they're using this tool to create an ad featuring the company's founder, Charles Lazarus. The ad depicts Lazarus having a dream about toys, but the AI-generated footage is criticized for its uncanny and unsettling visuals, which we'll get into in a second, such as distorted characters and objects. Critics argue that using generative AI, especially in advertising, and especially for children's products, disrespects artists and devalues human creativity. Toys R Us defends the ad and calls it innovative. The controversy highlights the ongoing debate surrounding the use of AI in creative fields and the potential consequences for both artists and consumers moving forward. This, along with what we just talked about, will be a hot button topic in the marketing world for a really, really long time. We're at the tip of the iceberg with this one. Where do we see AI's place in the creative agency or the creative industry moving forward? For me, this is a really, really tough one. And I think, when you go and watch this commercial, and you and I chatted about this ahead of time, you said you've watched it once, and just watching it as a commercial, it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting, that's cool, etc. When you go back and watch it again and start to slow it down a bit, there's things happening there where it's like, what? What's that? What toy is that flying by him? What's this? And I mean, these tools aren't perfect, and when you really break it down, you start to see that. And I know there's been all sorts of really funny articles and videos out there. People are breaking this thing down frame by frame and going, "What's the deal? What's the deal?" And I get that. But in terms of how it's going to affect the creative industry moving forward, I really hope tools like this enable creatives to be more creative. Do I think that's necessarily going to happen? I don't know. For example, my sister works in television and film. She's a writer in television and film. While some people say, well, these kind of tools could basically just build a script and you'd never need a writer anymore, I hope creativity still reigns and people can use these tools to unleash their creativity further or help make things quicker. The process is quicker. I've seen the scripts that she writes, and those things are monsters, right? Like for a TV show, those things are huge. Could she use tools to streamline that process while still injecting her creativity into it? That's my hope. Do I think that's necessarily going to happen? I don't know. And you think about something else. We talked about Star Wars last week, and Chewie's still here. Svelte Chewie hasn't gone anywhere. He's still here. But think about Star Wars movies and the reason that 4, 5, and 6 came out first. One of the big reasons that 4, 5, and 6 came out first is Lucas didn't think the technology was there to properly do 1, 2, and 3, right? Because they required a lot of additional technology. Think about that today, where maybe there's a filmmaker out there with very little budget but has a really cool idea. Being able to use these tools to make that idea a real thing and bring it to life, that's exciting. It didn't remove the creativity from it. It allowed that person to expedite the process, essentially. So my hope is that's the way it goes. I don't know if that's the way it's going to go, but I always think there's going to be a need for human creativity to read the room, to understand the consequences of what's being put out, and to bring that extra level of creativity to something that right now AI can't do.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk about creativity. Yeah. And Chewie.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think, like you mentioned, I have only watched the video once. It's about a minute long, a minute and 10 seconds long. I was watching it very much as an ad, not really with a particularly discerning eye to see. I wasn't looking at it as what's AI doing now. It was more just about how is this as a general ad. And I didn't really notice any of the things you're pointing out. I'm sure if I go back and watch it again, then yeah, I'll be like, oh, his face has changed, or his hair has changed, or there's
then the horrors are revealed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that's all there. But I think it does show how incredible this technology has gotten and how fast it has gotten there. And I suppose if we remember that this is the worst it's going to be, it's not going to go backwards from now on, sort of thing. So it is improving, and at an incredible rate. And that's the scary part, as you said. I mean, I think that there are throughout history, there have been numerous technologies that people think are going to be massively disruptive to people in certain areas of work. When Photoshop first came out, a lot of people were concerned that designers and photographers and everything was they were going to be without work. And that turned into something that was a great tool for people who were in those professions, or artists who used those. But I think the AI versions are a bit scarier in the sense that they're so easy to use. Like, if you don't know how to use Photoshop, it's a slog to learn how to get to do all the things you want to do in it, sort of thing. But a lot of these AI tools, you just type in what you want and it spits it out. I agree with you that I think it's a great tool for the creative people who could be using it. Like, if you want to make a storyboard, for example, and this AI tool lets you make a storyboard in 5 minutes when it would have taken you, an afternoon or a morning before. That's great. It's helpful, and you can give people ideas right off the bat, and they can say what they like and don't like. And then the creative person would go and take those ideas and actually make the finished product. But I do have concerns that that's not how it's going to pan out, and people are just going to say, oh, well, we don't need a designer anymore because I can type 50 words into this text box and it spits out something that's good enough for what I need. Mm-hmm. And then if that happens, it's just a race to the bottom in terms of quality, I think, at that point, where you don't have that artistic insight, you don't have that creative touch. You're just finding something that will do the job and putting it out there. And that's concerning to me.
Yeah, I think we're at that crossroads of, if you go one way, it's just race to the bottom, cheapest wins. Yeah. Let's just get stuff out the door. But the other way is, let's use these tools combined with human creativity and just ramp things up. And I hope that's the path that's taken, but time will tell.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So we will see where that goes. But yeah, I was encouraged and inspired to go shop at Toys R Us, even though I don't have kids that would shop at Toys R Us anymore. But I'm going to head there on the weekend. And Jeffrey the Giraffe, though, solid kind of figure or logo for a company. I like Jeffrey the Giraffe. Yeah, and he's in the commercial too. I don't want to give too much away. No. Jeffrey the Giraffe is in it, along with the creepy footsteps that sound like it's a horror movie, which was the one thing you did notice when he's walking down a hall. It sounds like maybe he's going to go stab somebody.
Yeah, it was a bit. It felt a bit out of place. That's it.
Ominous.
Yes, ominous is a good word. Yeah.
Yeah. Woo. All right, Ian, let's get our crowns on. I don't have it. Do you have a crown? Do you have a crown with you? No?
No, sadly not. Not to hand.
Someone from Scotland put the crown on right away, I thought. Guess not. It's time to be marketing king for a day. We use a lot of marketing tools and channels on our day-to-day work at our agency, many of which we've talked about on the podcast. We regularly talk about the tools that we use. While most of these tools provide a lot of value and make our lives easier, it's very rare that we find something that's just absolutely perfect. There tends to be small flaws in everything that we use, which is normal, which is fine. If you were marketing king for the day, what is one change or addition you would make to a marketing tool or channel that you use regularly? What are you thinking if you were marketing king? King Ian. Ian of Scotland.
I think mine would have to be regarding Facebook Business Suite and Facebook Business Manager. For a number of years now, Facebook has been moving away from Business Manager and towards Business Suite. And it feels like that has kind of either gone as far as it's going to go or just stalled. There are two sort of separate segments or iterations of it running at the same time. And I would love to just wave a magic wand over that and have it all just nice and streamlined so everything's all in one place. I think that Facebook has been working towards making it easier to use for individual businesses, people who have small businesses and want to do advertising or such like on their Facebook profiles and Instagram. But for those of us in marketing agencies and things like that, when you're managing multiple accounts, having to switch back between Business Suite and Business Manager and not remembering where things are or finding it hard to discover these things yet again, even though you looked it up 2 or 3 days ago. I would love to see that just more streamlined.
My kids the other day said, "Dad, I've never seen you cry." I said, "Well, you haven't seen me try to navigate Meta Business Suite before, because I cry on a daily basis because of that." And to your point, Ian, I don't know if a magic wand would fix that. It's a magic bulldozer as far as I'm concerned.
Indeed, yeah.
It's one of the things that we get asked about so frequently to troubleshoot.
Yes.
Is the idea of untangling a mess, a meta mess on somebody's page isn't attached to a certain business manager because an agency started it 5 years ago and you can't find that person and they can't do this because of this. News for you, in newsflash, we have another one of those. I have it written down in my notebook. We'll talk about that next week. We got another one. Yep. But it's just such a tangled mess. And it was like, as Facebook started adding more things, they didn't properly merge or get rid of the old thing. It's like they were just stacking things on top of one another, like a meta lasagna, that now you got to dig through all the layers to figure things out. I 100% agree with that. If somebody could truly just solve it and make it easy to add things in and to move things around and to change owners and there would need to be checks and balances in place. I get that, but it's such a mess. It's just such a mess. Mine is kind of going off of something we talked about. We talked last week and the week before about YouTube's test and compare that's now rolled out, where you can test multiple versions of thumbnails. It'll run through different versions of thumbnails to see which one works the best. I really wish YouTube, and hopefully they do, extends this into test and compare for titles, descriptions, etc. Like, you've got the thumbnails figured out now. It'd be really cool if titles and descriptions were next on the list. I know there's third-party tools that will do that you have to pay for, but I'm hoping, and I can only imagine, that that's probably on YouTube's radar, because if you think about it, the more tools like that they provide people like us and businesses and creators, the better off we can help to figure out where our videos should fall in terms of the algorithm. The better the videos appear for people, the easier it is for people to find, the more advertising revenue YouTube can then make because of, somebody's really getting what they want. They're finding the video that best matches whatever it is that they're looking for. So for me, if I was king for a day, I would be waving my magic wand over top of YouTube headquarters and saying, hey, fantastic with test and compare for thumbnails. Let's keep moving that test and compare along down the line and add other things in there. I think that would be really, really cool and really useful. Not just to help your videos show up better and hopefully get more views, but there's a lot to learn there about what people are searching for, etc. So that doesn't require the magic bulldozer.
No.
That just requires like a magic carpenter to just fix a few things around the edge. Yours is just like magic.
Yeah.
Boom.
I think based on current trajectories, you're going to get your wish sooner than I get mine.
Yes. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I would 100% take mine over yours right now. I could see mine this time next year. I could see yours not this time next year. Yeah. Before we turn 50.
I don't know.
Okay. If you read some of the comments on our YouTube videos, people think we're already 60s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. People also say we look the same. I don't know where you get that from.
No, I don't know either.
Yeah, strange. All right, Ian, we talked about Canadian foods. We talked about Meta using their posts for AI training. We talked about if we were kings for the day, what kind of thing would we look to get into? I think that kind of covers it. Oh no, there's one more topic, Ian. There is. You know why? Because I changed my script around here. So, yeah, I know. My bad. Let's wrap things up with a bit of personal development.
Sure.
We just talked about some tools that we use at our agency on a daily basis, and we use a lot of them. One of the problems with these tools is that new ones come out so quickly that we might see them, but we don't really have time to test them, to experiment with them, and ultimately put them in place. So even if we find a tool that we think could be really interesting, there is that backlog of time that we need to try to figure out if it's worth it. Hypothetical, we have 1 week off, which it's not going to, that's a hypothetical, Ian. It's a hypothetical. But let's say we take a week off for personal development and we can spend some time learning about a new tool. What tool have you seen out there, or maybe you use, but you don't quite know all the features yet? What would that one tool be that you would be like, I would spend some of my time figuring this thing out because I think it would really benefit me?
Yeah, I think for me it would be Midjourney. Midjourney is obviously not new. It's been on the scene for quite a while, although they are iterating on it all the time. But yeah, I think it's one of the tools, the AI tools, that I've never really used, and that's partly just because it's all done through Discord, and Discord is not a tool that I particularly use, so it feels like learning two separate things at the same time almost to get into it. But from what I read and hear, Midjourney is still one of the best options when it comes to image generation. And just because it's not one that I've ever used, I've used a few others like DALL-E and Leonardo.ai, but I haven't used Midjourney. And for that reason, I think it would be something I'd like to try. Might not take me a week to learn how to use it. Probably wouldn't. It might be something you'd learn in an afternoon. But then just having some time to experiment with prompt generation, like writing prompts to see what it generates and things like that, I think having the time to sit down and really dedicate to that would be quite an interesting experience.
So if you could wrap up the learning part of it in a day, you get the rest of the week to do nothing. That's the way I look at it. But I think that's an interesting one. And, we've talked about these tools even just today about, would it replace the creativity of a human? I think, and, a tool like that, it would just be interesting to learn so you know how to use it. Yeah. And maybe you can use it as inspiration, or you're trying to tell somebody, I want this thing to look like this. Oh, make it look kind of like this based on some of the prompts I gave this tool, or work off of this as a bit of a template, if you will.
Absolutely, yeah. It's. I think it's a great tool for those kinds of things. Like, for example, I can't use AutoCAD, or I can't do certain things with other software. Like, I'm fairly competent with Photoshop, but there might be a specific thing I want to do that I don't know how, or can pass off to someone else and just say, "Here's your guide. Go and make it the way. Go and create it, but make it look kind of like this." And I think that would be a good starting point. Much easier than describing it or trying to like hand draw it yourself on a piece of paper and sending someone off on a wild goose chase to build.
That's old school.
What's in your head? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's old school when we used to be in the office and we had whiteboards,
Yeah,
and you kind of just put it up on the whiteboard and be like, I need this. And then hopefully somebody understands your really bad drawing.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
No one ever understood my drawings. I think the one tool that I would really spend some time looking at is Microsoft Paint. I'm just kidding.
A classic.
Oh, I should have gone with it. Yeah. I want to go back a ways and learn more about Paint. I know there's AI tools out there now, but I just need that classic paint stroke, brush stroke drawing. That's really what I'm going for. No, in all seriousness, there's a tool that Duncan, who's normally here, uses. Yasher on our team is testing right now too, called Make. Duncan's brought up Make before, but Make is kind of like a way to string different apps and different programs together to create custom workflows, streamline things, etc. And as a Yahoo Pipes enthusiast from many years ago, it's kind of like it, but on steroids. But it's really interesting to see some of the possibilities there, where you could say, scrape this database for people that match this. And then once you get those people, put them into a Google Sheet, and from there, create something in ChatGPT to match the needs of these people, and then send it over to my Gmail, and it's crafted an email. Like things, it's setting up those types of workflows that would allow somebody to be able to do a lot more things quickly, without having to manually go and find data and parse data, etc. And some of the things that they've already started to come up with are really, really interesting on the workflow side. You know, we're even going to test it with some of the content we create here on the podcast. How can we create written content, blog posts out of what we talk about on the podcast? If we wanted to have a blog post talking about which Star Wars movie is the best of all time, how could we use Make to string a couple of tools together to be able to produce that based on what we said? So to me, that would be definitely a tool I think that would take like the full week to learn. Yeah. There's a lot to it. But as you start to figure things out, I think the possibilities are endless.
Absolutely.
Then I would turn my attention to Paint. Then I would, yeah. Were you ever a Paint guy? Like, you're creative. You can use Photoshop. For a guy like me, I can't use Photoshop. It's just straight up Paint.
Yeah, I've never really learned to use Paint. I think you have to be able to be artistic to use Paint and make something good from it.
I agree with that. That's maybe why I use it, because I'm so artistic.
I heard the other day, and I never knew this about Paint, but I heard the other day that if you click once, hold down Shift, and use the arrow keys, you can use it like an Etch-a-Sketch. And it just draws straight lines while you're holding Shift. I've never tested it. I don't have a PC anymore. I'm on a Mac now, so I can't test it. But maybe you can test and see if this is a true story.
I'm going to be testing it the second we get off here. That's going to be my afternoon, is testing MS Paint and the Etch-a-Sketch feature.
Yep.
All right, that wraps up another episode. Ian, I hope you have a fantastic maple syrup-filled long weekend. The weather is supposed to be pretty nice. Celebrate Canada however you might. Go to a parade, have a barbecue, watch some fireworks.
Yeah, those all sound great.
Eat in a Nanaimo bar, watch hockey, and there's no hockey. Watch hockey replays, whatever you might do. We'll be back again in a couple weeks. We're going to take a week off because it's the long weekend. I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you soon. Now, let's get back to work for a little bit before we wrap up for the long weekend. Bye, everybody.